Will the AFL ever expand beyond 18 teams? It's an interesting question. There's been no real desire from the AFL to do this, but will it ever get to that point in the future? And it is a possibility. The issue is, where do you expand? Where do you put two new teams? Because the Victorian market with Geelong and Melbourne is very, very saturated, much like the Sydney market in the NRL. South Australia and Adelaide is not the wealthiest of the big cities in Australia. Perth, yeah, you could do another team in Perth. New South Wales, absolutely, you could whack a team in New South Wales alongside Sydney Swans and the Greater Western Sydney. Absolutely, you could put another team in there. Queensland, it's again a possibility. The Gold Coast Suns are finally are now stable, and the Brisbane Lions. You could have a third team in the Brisbane metropolitan area. Absolutely. The NRL, while it is expanding, is not expanding in AFL territory, and that is the weakness of the NRL. They have decided to expand during the COVID period. Fine, that is very reactionary, but they've been conservative in where they've gone. If that makes sense, they've been reactionary but conservative at the same time. The AFL, I don't think there's any immediate need to expand now, but when it comes to the AFL, when you want to discuss expansion and will they ever, expand past 18 teams, it's where do you put a team? Because Tasmania and Northern Territory, while they do take games on the road there, and there's a lot of players who play their state or territory league footy before going up to the AFL, obviously come from these locations, I don't think there's enough corporate money and enough population base to really justify putting teams there. Could it work? Quite possibly. But when you're looking at the bigger scheme of things, it does cost a lot to run a professional sports team. And if you're expanding to a location which has a lower population base, less money, which is very, very crucial to remember that Tasmania and Northern Territory aren't the wealthiest areas in Australia. So Darwin and Hobart and Launceston, they don't have massive amounts of cash as disposable average income for the average resident. So that's got to bear in mind. You've got to bear that in mind. Sydney, there's a lot of money in Sydney. Perth, rapidly expanding city. Adelaide, one of the poorer, bigger metropolitan areas. Slower growth in Adelaide. Brisbane, always, a major, hub. So there is possibilities for expansion. It's whether there is the appetite from AFL head office to do so, and do fans want it? Do AFL fans want to see the league expand? Now, on the NRL side of things, they are being reactionary to the COVID pandemic. They've sped up their expansion process. They obviously realise that the TV negotiations, unless they grow the league to 18 teams, the TV money is not going to be as much as predicted. COVID sped up the process, as I say. Whereas the AFL has that bigger league by two teams and has the bigger, player base in the lower grades, which the NRL does not have. Rugby league in Australia is very East Coast centric, whereas Aussie rules nationwide. So I don't see the AFL expanding now. It's a possibility in the future, and I wouldn't be surprised if the AFL has a department in head office looking at the possibility of expansion and growing the game further and taking the fight again further to the NRL and rugby league and possibly expanding further into their heartlands and growing the game in Queensland and New South Wales. That is quite a possibility. And the Brisbane Lions are a successful team, and the Sydney Swans are a reasonably successful team as well, that are more established. You've got, Gold Coast Suns and Greater Western Sydney as the two last expansion teams. So there's already 4 teams in New South Wales and Queensland. Could they make that 6? It's a possibility, but I don't see the AFL moving right now. But I want to see what you guys think as AFL fans, if there are any AFL fans on the channel. Do you think the AFL will expand past 18 teams at some point? I'll be interested to see what you guys as Aussie Rules fans feel about that. And don't get me wrong, I'm a massive rugby league fan. I love the NRL, but I do think the NRL has been mismanaged for so long that the AFL is winning the domestic battle, at least in Australia, for viewership, for sponsorship, for player base. Because when kids are at school in the grassroots level, a kid may play rugby league, rugby union, Aussie Rules, and then when they come to choose that sport, if they want to take it professional or play at a higher level as an amateur, AFL has the bigger player base, and so therefore, in my opinion, AFL is winning the domestic battle, at least in Australia, for top talent. And I think that's been played out when you look at the NRL and the amount of Polynesian players who are from Fiji, Tonga, Samoa, New Zealand, the Cook Islands who play in the NRL, who aren't interested in Aussie rules. But then you look at the domestically brought up players, the AFL has a high proportion. There's less overseas players in the AFL. There's a handful of Irish, players who play Gaelic football. But the AFL seems to be developing and nurturing the domestic talent far better than rugby league. So there we go. I want to hear your thoughts. Will the AFL expand past 18 teams? Would that be too reactionary for the AFL, considering what the NRL is doing, or will stability win the day? We shall see what happens. But thank you very much for watching. Place your thoughts below, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.